Entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience Valentine's Day special. You may be watching it before, on, or even after that lucky day. But we wanted to bring some joy into your life, a lot of negativity surrounding sports, especially the online discourse. So today we are talking about the 5 things we love about sports. You smash the like, you sub to the channel, hell, share this show around with everyone. But I do want to hear from you guys in the comment section about this, about the 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5, even power ranked things that you still love about sports, because there's a lot to not like about it at the moment, but you can still find that joy. Why do we want to talk about this? Why do we still lean into this so much? Is it just because we get paid to do it? Maybe. But it's not just that, because you had to start somewhere when it was for free at the same time. So joining me, Mr. Positivity himself. I needed him for this show. Nejad, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. This is a cool concept, cool show. It's funny and kind of ironic. I'm not a big Valentine's Day guy, dating back in terms of the art of going out to dinner for 2 and seeing all those other couples. That's a conversation for another time. But the positivity you're pulling in with sports, this is a pretty cool concept. I've got some cool ones we can discuss.
And we're doing a guest exchange program with Pete Overzet. I am going to be with him on his After Dark show over on Pete's YouTube channel. You can find that link in the description. Friday evening. So, Pete, if you really got nothing to do on Valentine's Day, you can watch me and you.
I know. I almost messaged you after you agreed to do it. I was like, hey, just heads up, you do know that that's Valentine's Day evening, in case that was going to blow up some plans with your wife. No, so I'm excited to have you. And yeah, we're actually going to do 5 things we hate about sports on that show. So it'll be a real yin yang. Just kidding. We're just going to shoot the shit about content and business and stuff.
Yeah, we're going to come back in a month's time. Maybe we'll find National Hate Day or something, and we'll just do the 5 things we all hate about each other. And that'll be the highest rated show in history. But I had a couple of near misses on my top 5. The one thing I really love about sports is the viewers of the Pat Mayo Experience, especially those of you who use code Mayo and Underdog. You are the real heroes out there. Probably number 1 on the power rankings, but I just wanted to say that at the beginning, so please go use code Mayo at Underdog right now. Get yourself a free pick, get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. Pete, you doing best ball drafts yet?
You know what? I've been holding out,
Good.
But I did just schedule a stream for Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern. I will be drafting my first 2025 team. I'm scared. I'm terrified. I don't even think I would have done it on my own, volition, but the people are frothy for best ball drafts. So I'm just going to meet them where they're at, and I'll start streaming these.
Well, better you than me, sir, because I have no interest in
know.
thinking about that right now. But see, we do have golf major Underdog draft season coming up. That is something I can lean into.
Yeah, something I can lean into as well, though I have to concede I haven't engaged yet. This is the moment, though. This is the moment that I'll try to turn the page. So thank you for the reminder.
So did you guys come up with 5 apiece? Did you have honorable mentions you wanted to get out of the way? Because I was pretty vague with the specifics of what I meant. It could be a current thing in sports. It could be adjacent to sports. It could be a historic thing in sports. It could be just something you enjoy about participating or even viewing, because that's one of mine as well. Were you confused about what I had asked you?
So what's so funny, Pat, is because I know you well enough to know not to ask a follow-up question, because yes, you dressed it with a very sort of vague notion about, 5 things you love about sports, which could be interpreted in so many different ways. And I was literally on my phone about to send a follow-up text, and I was like, no. Pat wants me to be confused here. So what I did is I have some specific examples of things I love in sports, some more generic examples. And I got to be honest with you, I got 10 or 15 things here. I've got 5 that I've got kind of highlighted here. And, you might steal one, Pete might steal one. So I've got others kind of in the bank to go to. But I went both the specific and generic route.
So I had one, just to kick it off, Pete, is going to be one of my honorable mentions, just historic things I really loved about sports that got me super engaged to do a job like this. Do you remember those fantasy file commercials from the NFL Network?
No,
it was
I don't think I do.
It was like draft Chris. I just vividly remember the Chris Cooley one where he jammed his hands through drywall for a catch. Be like, draft
Yes.
Chris Cooley.
Yes, I remember those. Yeah.
So that was on my honorable mention list because I love those so much. And frankly, the old NFL Network postgame show, that had Dion on it, you do 21st and Prime. I lived for that. When I was 20, after football would end that day, be like, I need to watch this. This is awesome.
NFL Network also, they had a lot of good stuff. I mean, they still do, I guess, but like, remember that jingle in the offseason, NFL replay jingle, which like really got you, and they basically play like almost like, if I memory serves, like a red zone version of like week 1 through week, at the time it would have been week 16, week 17, but you would basically be able to, you're studying for your best ball drafts, or even if that wasn't around, like your fantasy drafts and things of that nature. And you were able to watch these games like very quickly. And they had this nice jingle to it. And I don't want to sing it because I'll sound completely ridiculous, but that was good old school stuff. And you're reminding me of other stuff I love about sports, which I'm not trying to kick things off because I don't want to steal anybody's, but like the This Is Sports Center stuff, where you actually got to see, some of these guys on Sports Center, but also some of the athletes engage back and forth. That's something maybe we can talk about later in the show, but that stuff is amazing.
What you're talking about is NFL replay
Yes.
on the
Yes.
NFL net, and it's like Warren Sapp dancing.
Yeah, it would be like on Tuesday, and they would just like do it for the whole week. It was good stuff. Yes.
Pete, did you have did you have honorable mentions?
You just jogged my memory. Like, my equivalent of what you guys are discussing is when I was a kid, we just randomly had a VHS tape, and it was called 1993 Sports Illustrated, The Year in Sports. And it was like an electric year in sports. You probably remember, of course, Toronto.
I do.
The Joe Carter walk-off. So you got that. You got the Bulls, that first three-peat beating the Suns. And it's just a compilation of all these moments. And I remember wearing that VHS tape out, just watching it over and over. It was like 50 minutes, hopping around to all the best. And I just love that kind of, recap. And as a kid, I probably watched it 100 times.
What's strange about that, Pete, is like we talked about this on I did a hockey show for like the first time ever for this Four Nations Cup, and it kind of jogged some of the memories that I had about getting Rock'em Sock'em, Don Cherry's Rock'em Sock'em VHS every Christmas morning. It was basically something everyone who was born between the ages of like 1979 and 1991, you got some version of this every Christmas morning, and you would just pop it in right away, see the most illegal hits you would ever want to see. It's like it's like going back to like watching the old Monday Night Football, like in between like halftime and pregame show when they're doing jacked up. You're like, wow, that guy wouldn't be in the league anymore if he kept trying to make these hits. But still, it's such a vivid memory. It just going through all of those VHSs. They have these compilations online, Pete, now. You can just go to YouTube to watch them. The thing is, I never watch them. There's something
I know
about like the tactile nature of a VHS that you had to go do it. And maybe it's just I've aged out of it and people are still doing that, but it just seems like if I'm going to go and watch not even a compilation, like I'll watch a highlight for like 40 seconds, but I'm not sitting down and watching an hour worth of year highlights, which is something that I used to love.
Yeah, and I think there's a scarcity element too, right? Like if in my childhood home, there was a million VHS tapes of every sports highlight ever imagined, I'd probably be like, I'm too overwhelmed, paralysis by, choice. But the fact that you just had the one thing, and it's like, this is what I'm going to latch onto, or was that one, magazine. I remember having the ESPN magazines as a kid, the like really big ones there too. And it was like, I loved reading those. Now, all that information's on the internet. There's tons of great writing. There's a million Substacks, all of this stuff. But it's like the scarcity. This is the one thing, and this is all I got. I think that led to more enjoyment interacting with that kind of media.
See, do you think that gambling has been a problem with this, or are we just old and don't care anymore?
Gambling been a problem with what exactly?
Just taking that sort of enjoyment out of sports, because that's really all you had with sports. Because like even Paul was talking about it to me like yesterday, just like, hey, we're watching this UFC card, we're watching this golf event. Like, are you watching the end of the Phoenix Open? For like the non-really diehard, it's like, well, if I don't have like a guy who has a chance to win and I have money, like I'm probably not tuning in.
Yeah, I think it has a little bit, but I mean, I do. There is an element of society that's watching these games that actually doesn't have money on it. We're kind of in this vortex where like we've got money in DFS plays, and I do understand that with the legalization of gambling in the United States, like obviously there's a lot more people involved, but I still think there's plenty of people out there that are just watching sport because they love sport. As for those gamblers, yeah, I do think, to your point, I've never thought of that. I do think it kind of deteriorates the product in terms of like just the fulfillment and enjoyment of watching it. But that's the thing. There are still moments, and we're going to talk about them later in the show. There are still moments in sports that transcend any of the gambling wins and losses. Yeah, losses hurt and all those things, but there are still those moments, even moments where you don't have money on them, like in collegiate athletics or something you catch in high school sports or in pregame, in warmups in an NBA game or what have you. Like those things fall outside of the gambling spectrum, and that they're very much appreciated, I think, by just the common viewer, whether they gamble or not.
You got to get those 5-pick, $10 parlays in, Pete. That's how it works.
And it's all it's a double-edged sword, right? Because we do see the people on X and stuff, and gambling can turn them into monsters. They want refunds, they're adding players, and just they don't get it. And then for me, one of my things, and I guess we'll do a little bit of a spoiler here, is it has given me this communal excuse to keep up with my college buddies. We'll do a long shot sweat, March Madness, we'll pick a team, even like the UCL or whatever, the Premier League, we'll pick a team and we'll just, all collectively sweat it. And it gives us something to talk about, keeps the group chat flowing. And like the gambling element of it actually adds this like bonding experience where we can't all go watch the games live together. We're, scattered across the country. And there is this element of that makes it so fun. And I'm sure people have similar things with fantasy leagues, March Madness pools, etc. Like in the right way, like sports and gambling on sports can be a really, fun kind of coalescing community thing.
We still have our like 14 team keeper league from 15 years ago. Like this is the only time of year I talk to, I wouldn't say all of the people, because I have very close friends that are still in it. But for years, like we had a guy in China who was in the league, just people who live overseas, just because they've moved on with their lives. And it was the one way that we were able to continue to have that sort of contact the entire time. I really do think that besides the personal element of being invested in each of these football games, I do think that has been the success and longevity of fantasy, like season-long fantasy football.
It's such a good point. I mean, the truth is, I have 3. I mean, generally, I'm in 4 or 5 year-long fantasy leagues, but there's 3 that have been going for like almost 20 years with old friends from like my law school days or even college days, or just like Northern Virginia, like some of my friends from high school, out in Northern Virginia. And the truth is, I have no time for these leagues. I mean, we all have, Pete, you, me, we have so much when it comes to our schedules. And then you add in the layer of DFS, which for me takes precedent over any year-long fantasy leagues. The truth is, these days, my year-long is like more of a donation at this point, because I just don't have time for it. But I'm still willing to make that donation because of what you two just said. It brings us together almost throughout the year. We're like all in different WhatsApp chats, and there's some crossover with some people there. But the long and short of it is, if it wasn't for the fantasy leagues, I'm not sure how much I'd be communicating with these people, in spite of the fact that I want to, but I don't know that I would actually do it if not for these fantasy leagues that I'm probably not going to win because I'm not putting the time in. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of sports, is just like bringing people together in contexts that you never would have thought of 10, 20 years ago.
Pete, we'll start with you. What's the number 5 thing on your power rankings that you love about sports?
Yeah, and I guess I'll say how I'm doing these. They're almost in a chronological order of how I started to experience fandom, and they kind of show like the ways that I've loved sports in different ways as I've grown up. So I'm going to go way back to just right after that 1993 VHS Sports Illustrated highlight recap. And the first like real joy I remember as a sports fan, 1994, Denver Nuggets. I'm 7 years old. They are the 8th seed in the Western Conference playoffs, going up against this juggernaut Seattle Supersonics team with Sean Kemp and Gary Payton. And, the one thing you learn, right? The 8th seed, they're not winning the NBA. That's just not happening. And I love this team. It was the first team I fell in love with. Dikembe Mutombo wagging his finger all over the place. And they pull off the stunner there. And my dad, I think, was like trying to convey to me like how insane this was. I think as just like a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed fan, I was like, no, of course our team won. The Nuggets won. But it was like the insanity of them pulling off that upset. Dikembe, it was like we won the national championship or the NBA championship when that happened. And that was that first moment for me of like, hot damn, I love sports.
It's funny you mentioned the Joe Carter thing a little bit earlier, because that was going to make my list. Like, what's the first big thing I remember? I remember the Joe Carter home run, because that was a giant thing up here, and I think I was 8 years old when it happened, which just made it even more amazing. Like, oh, my teams never lose. This is great. Back-to-back World Series. Did not turn out all that great. And I was a big Vancouver Canucks fan, growing up, and they made the finals against the Rangers. I believe that was in 90. Was that on the 94 Sports Illustrated, Pete?
Yes, or the Joe Carter one was on the 93.
The
And that's
93.
the only VHS tape. That's the only year I know a lot about in sports from the 90s. This is that tape,
Yeah,
93.
so I think Rangers Canucks was 1994. I just remember those West Coast games being beyond Eastern time, living in the Atlantic time zone, and being 9 years old, be like, I have to stay up to like 1 a.m. to watch this. And they lost in 7 games. It was devastating. But those are the two things really from like getting me into sports and be like loving it. That and like my dad letting me fill out his like weekend pick'em pool in hockey and like circling the teams, win, lose, or tie, and just like basically teaching kids how to gamble at 7 years old with these like bar pools were like the big thing for that. Did you have a thing like in your childhood that like drew you in?
Yeah, it was probably, I'm old enough to have caught some of Magic Johnson's career. And of course, Washington, who were the Redskins at the time, the Commanders now, obviously. My family was a huge football family, and I played basketball. So like watching Magic Johnson, watching Washington games, and they were so good back then. I can remember I probably was 5, 6 years old. I'm watching Washington games like pretty intensely with my family. That's definitely what drew me in. And then another thing that drew me in, which is kind of more of a global thing, is that when they won in 87 and 91, I was too young at that time to like really know what like racism was and like political differences and all of those things. I mean, I guess I just wasn't exposed to it as young as I was. And for me to see, Doug Williams was the quarterback for Washington, first Black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. For me to see like cultures and races like all hugging and like sharing things and like everybody on the same page, like I always kind of go back to that moment when I want to have like faith in humanity. And that's another thing with like sports, like bringing people together, but that also brought me into sports as well. So those our Washington teams were actually pretty great back then, so that's what brought me in, that and Magic.
Well, then you're now maybe re-entering a new golden era of Washington sports. I mean, the Wizards have to be the sacrifice, but everyone else seems to be doing okay.
The Caps are actually curiously great with of course Eight the Great and Alex Ovechkin. But yeah, I mean, honestly, the Jaden Daniels, the new management, ownership, all of that, it's things are looking $80 million of cap space. Things are looking really, really good for the Commanders.
So to kind of pile in with Pete and like just a very like to take the leap from like being a kid and being excited about sports, then getting like really into sports. I remember my dad buying me this history of baseball, like thick anthology, and me just like reading it every single day. And that kind of came to fruition about getting more into sports. And it's funny to think about this, but you have to remember how popular it was at the time, Pete. Was the 1998 Sosa versus McGuire home run race was just like that was captivating to like a 12-year-old.
It's so funny you say that. I remember getting the newspaper every day, immediately going to the sports section and just looking at the total. You could see the leader in RBIs, home run. It was just, that was how I consumed that. It was like, I want to see where this race is taking place.
See, do you have fond memories of the home run race?
I do, actually. And I wasn't even, even to this day, I'm not like a huge baseball MLB guy. I mean, I do watch it and I do bet on it here and there. But yeah, that was, the steroid era, if we're being honest, was like the coolest era of baseball. And I don't think I'm breaking any news there. I mean, these balls were flying out. The way McGuire looked, Sosa, of course, Barry Bonds. I mean, the problem with, the steroid crackdown, obviously it should have happened, but like you started to see these players like kind of like be human again, as opposed to what looked like superhuman. But yeah, I was completely dialed in on that era. I absolutely loved whether it was the home run derby or just watching game to game. It was so cool to watch McGuire, Sosa, guys like Bonds just even walk up to the plate.
In that era, Pete, were you team McGuire, team Sosa? Because I feel like we were all team Griffey and he was just too far behind.
Yeah, I want to say I was on Team Sosa because I loved the little thing he did right after he hit the home run where he did the double thing like that. And I just thought that was so badass that he had that celebration after every home run, and I would always mimic that there. So I think I was a Sosa guy.
See ya.
I was a McGuire guy, and it's only because back then I rooted for the Orioles because of where I was from. The Nationals weren't a team, but the first team I ever liked was the St. Louis Cardinals for whatever reason, and so that just kind of like transferred over to me wanting McGuire over Sosa in that battle.
What do you have at number 5?
So I have, this is kind of a little bit generic, but I'll give you some specific examples, I guess. I have the walk-off whether it's baseball or really any other sport. Like, again, in terms of things I love about sports, the walk-off moment where, I mean, there's so like for baseball, the one thing I think of, speaking of Toronto, I think this is Toronto, when Jose Bautista did the bat flip.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is what, 15 years ago, maybe more. I'm not even 100% sure.
2014. I remember this because I was watching. I lived by the stadium at the time, but I wasn't at the game. But it wasn't frigid in Toronto at that time. So I had my balcony door open and I was watching the game, and all I heard was this like explosion of noise outside before the pitch happened of me watching it on TV. And it's like, oh, that the noise was the stadium, people going crazy. And I just got to watch it on like 10-second delay later.
So I like that I bring that specific example for a couple of reasons. One is because it was obviously an amazing moment, especially for Blue Jays fans. But the fact that he did the bat flip is so cool to me because of the stupid unwritten rules of baseball that are largely kind of fading away. The fact that he did the bat flip like back then, I thought was so cool. The bat flip itself looked so cool. Those moments, these walk-off moments, I mean, we could do it with like Deshaun Jackson comes to mind against the New York Giants. Dame time, when he was with Portland. Nova UNC is another good one where Arcidiacono in his like 8th year of eligibility or whatever it was, passes it to, I think, Jenkins, game winner. Those, along with the announcers calling them, those are like electric moments that you can go back to today and still kind of feel a little bit of that moment.
So that really dovetails into my number 4, which was Linsanity, which I very much enjoyed. It's the last time I really got like captivated by the NBA. You have your LeBron moments, you have your Curry moments, and obviously during 2019, being in Toronto, going to the finals games, rooting for the Raptors and them actually winning an NBA championship was great. But the excitement around Linsanity, Pete, it was my last year of broadcasting school. And it's funny because this is a Valentine's Day show. I was in the arena. My girlfriend had got me tickets. We went together to go see Knicks Raptors. And it was at the height of Linsanity. It was on Valentine's Day in 2012. And he hit the game-winning 3 in Toronto, and the crowd could not have been happier. It was just so electric. I had never been in a stadium like that before.
Man, you just took me back too. And that was like Twitter was starting to pick up some steam, and the Lin puns, obviously Linsanity was the headliner, but you could not go anywhere without getting a Jeremy Lin pun shoved in your face. What a time to be alive.
Let's bring it back. I could do some more Lin puns, I think. We got ChatGPT now. That can help us out.
Oh God. Yeah, seriously. Yeah. The every blog post, the New York Post writers just licking their chops for another Jeremy Lin pun.
Where were you? Where were you in Linsanity?
So just so you know, you took my number 1 answer.
Really?
Truly. And so that's okay, because I have others I can go to, so no worries. But Linsanity was number 1. You're not going to find, I'm curious because, obviously the YouTube comments and Twitter, like maybe I'll get corrected on this. You're not going to find a better underdog story, at least in the modern era, that I can think of than Linsanity. First of all, Pat, have you guys seen 38 at the Garden? Because they feature that game in Toronto and how the Toronto fans were cheering for Linsanity to hit that last second shot. That is an excellent documentary. It kind of goes into some COVID related stuff too, but it really focuses on the underdog story that is Jeremy Lin. That is my number 1 answer. I don't think you're going to find a bigger underdog story for so many different cultural reasons more than anything. I can't get over that moment, that 1 or 2, 3 months or I guess probably 1 or 2 months of time. It was electric.
I don't even feel like it was 1 or 2 months, Pete. In retrospect, it felt like an eternity, but it may have been like 4 weeks. It felt like.
Yeah, of him, actually being super relevant. And then it was just such like an atomic bomb within the sports world that I think it probably seemed longer, right? People were writing about it. There were think pieces about it that were probably coming out, a month later. So it probably felt longer than it actually was.
And it's funny because he ended up winning an NBA championship with the Raptors on that 2019 team with Kawhi. Mm-hmm. But I'm just trying to think, if Linsanity is number 1, what would be another giant under? I guess that Leicester City team, but I guess that doesn't really resonate around here.
I'll give you 2. Well, one is kind of biased, and this will actually dovetail into one of mine, but like the Tim Tebow moment, on the Broncos, where everyone wrote him off. He was beloved by basically everyone at the time. And it really felt like almost like this Make-A-Wish thing. Like you watch Tim Tebow throw the ball and you're like, there's no way this guy could be an NFL quarterback, right? And then he has that throw to Demaryius Thomas against the Steelers that sent them to the second round of the playoffs. The other one I'll mention, Steph Curry's Davidson team in the run that they made, like one of the most electric underdog stories. You're like watching this 6-foot frail, green bean kid just nail every single shot that he takes and just, dethrone all of these heavy hitter teams in March Madness. That was crazy.
I'm a big Georgetown fan, and that was one of the teams he dethroned. And honestly, I didn't give him any respect, even going into the draft. I was thinking, maybe Ty Lawson's probably a better pick than Steph Curry. Shows how much I know. But the long and short of it is, he was absolutely murdering these like great 2-3 seeds. That's a really good call. I think some people are going to say Miracle on Ice. I'm kind of more focused on the individual rather than like the team in terms of my example, the number one sort of underdog story. But Steph Curry's a really good one.
Steph Curry's a good one. I mean, I'm too young for Miracle on Ice. Like, I wasn't born at the time. So you only see like it in retrospect. And in Canada, we had the Summit Series where we beat the Russians. So that was like our thing.
Yeah.
So trying to think what else now. What other big underdogs? Yeah, maybe we'll circle back to that. What was your other one, Pete? That dovetailed into?
So I was mentioning the Broncos, right? Because kind of following my arc of fandom, this Nuggets team, they get beat by the juggernaut, not ready to play with the big boys. And my family, specifically my grandfather, was way more of a football guy. And he was one of those just diehard Denver Broncos fans. And the Broncos had made the Super Bowl previous to the 97 one that they won, 3 or 4 times and just gotten their shit kicked out of them. Just absolutely boat raced by the Niners. They got beat by the Giants one year. They got beat by the Cowboys, I believe, another year. And so I would just hear nonstop how this franchise never going to win a Super Bowl. And like my grandfather wanted one thing before he passed away, and that was the Denver Broncos to win a Super Bowl. And so those back-to-back years with John Elway, that first Super Bowl against the Packers, you got Terrell Davis with the migraine coming in to run the fake play. You got John Elway doing the helicopter scramble hit, and he would never run, and taking that down and seeing like the joy on my grandfather and like all of my relatives who had been watching this team for decades just amount to nothing. That was one of those like power of sports moments for me too, where I was like, this is cool. Like my entire neighborhood's lighting off fireworks about this stuff. And I was in 5th grade when we won our first one. And it was just such a very fun experience to take in as a kid.
So post that, I mean, you're not like the biggest Broncos fan anymore, are you?
No. Which will kind of dovetail into some of my future ones here as I follow my arc of loving sports. But yeah, barely consider myself a Broncos fan now. But
you mentioned that Tebow era, and I loved that like Tebow 3-month stretch. Everyone remembers him to Demaryius Thomas in overtime. But there was a game against the Jets on Thursday Night Football where I think he ran the ball 25 times or something really stupid like that, and they won the game like 13-10. And it was just a miserable game to watch, but it was weirdly the most exciting thing ever to see this guy just pull out wins from anywhere.
I vaguely remember that because I felt like it happened on like in a lot of their games where he just was not throwing the ball downfield. He was running it. They were getting 3-4 yards at a time. I honestly think it was the following year after that DT touchdown against the Steelers. I think that's when Peyton Manning came into town. And I can remember being like really just like disgruntled that we weren't good. Like I figured at that point it was going to be like a hope and a prayer that Tebow was going to start for another team. I really wanted another year or two of Tebow, like likely on Denver. And when that was taken away, I was like, oh darn, this is like such a cool, I mean, he's a good dude too. It was such a cool storyline. I just wanted to watch that play out a little bit better than it ultimately did.
When you're going on a golf trip, you don't need any more stress. You don't need any more costly airline fees. With complimentary insurance, real-time tracking, and dedicated support and on-time delivery, you need to use ShipSticks.com. Just schedule your shipment, attach your label, and ShipSticks handles the rest, delivering your gear directly to your destination. You don't want to have to worry about a connection, whether your clubs are going to make it and you're racing to the course. No, your clubs are going to be there. ShipSticks offers white glove shipping for golf clubs and luggage. Travel worldwide without luggage. ShipSticks delivers to 180 countries for a hassle-free, gear-free journey. Right now, ShipSticks is offering my listeners 20% off your first shipment when you go to shipsticks.com and use the code PatMayo. Go to shipsticks.com and use the code PatMayo to get 20% off your first shipment and save yourself the hassle this golf season. That's shipsticks.com. Make sure to use the code PatMayo so they know that I sent you. Welcome to the TGL presented by SoFi, golf's newest league. It's sharp and it's electric. 2 hours of hammer dropping, overtime forcing, playoffs on the line golf with 24 of the best players from the PGA Tour. Monday, February 17th, triple header time. Atlanta versus LA, Atlanta versus the Bay, and the Bay versus Boston. Then Tuesday, it's Tiger and Jupiter against the New York Golf Club. Tune in to TGL matches only on ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPN Plus. Keep up. It's golf. Let's move to number 3 on the list. I'll start with mine. Because after college, Pete, I really gave up playing sports a ton. Like, the only thing I really kept doing was going to the gym and working out, which is not sports. It's just trying to stay in shape. And I periodically maybe play in a softball game if there was like a tournament going on or it was a work thing, or I'd play squash as some like extra cardio, which I somewhat enjoyed, but it was mainly for the exercise. But since I moved back from both Toronto and New York and moved back to where I'm at right now, it's not that I have more free time on my hands. It's just that accessibility is so much easier for golf here that I started golfing when I was 6 years old and basically gave it up when I was, 23 or something like that, because I moved away. It would take like an hour and a half to get outside the city to play. I had no money. I had no car. That was having no money when it comes to playing golf is a real difficult circumstance that you can get yourself into. But since I moved back here like 3 years ago or so, the act of getting back into golf, enjoying golf, and finding ways to actively improve, I mean, I've always liked it, but this is the most I've ever liked golf in my life. It gives me
I love it.
It gives me a chance to actually like play a sport again because I'm an old man now.
Yeah. Well, that's what kind of happened to me in that you play a bunch of sports as a kid. I essentially kind of got burned out on basketball, playing in high school and stuff, and you're doing it year round. And that honestly dovetails with kind of one of my things where I had this period where I kind of was done like playing sports, and I wasn't as interested in sports when I first went to college. I was like, moved to San Diego. I'm like, I'm going to surf, there's girls. Like, I don't need to, be obsessed with sports anymore. And it was actually fantasy sports that rekindled my appreciation for sports, because previously it was just all traditional fandom, Denver teams. That was good and fun. But when I started playing fantasy sports, I remember the first team I drafted, it was a football team, and I got, Jay Cutler and Tony Scheffler, and I'm, doing the homer thing of drafting my Broncos. But then I have D'Angelo Williams on this team. And this was the first fantasy football league I played was 2008. And D'Angelo Williams went absolutely nuts down the stretch. It was just like 100 plus rushing yards, TDs. And I was like, this is so fun. I got really into the J Stu, D'Angelo Williams, thunder and lightning backfield. And why would I ever be a fan of the Carolina Panthers, before? And this opened up my world to like, oh, it's okay to enjoy other things in sports that aren't just your hometown laundry guys. And that really opened up the portal. And one of the things I love about sports and love about fantasy sports, if you can do it in a healthy way, is there's so many storylines across the league. I appreciate so many dynamics because of NFL, because of fantasy and following these things. I'm starting to do it in NBA now as well. Once you free yourself from the shackles of traditional fandom, there's so much more to love.
Sia, when did you stop? I mean, are you still playing active sports at this point in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I play basketball, but not in it's very rare that I'm going to find a competitive basketball game. A lot of times I'm just going to go to the gym and play basketball to warm up, and I'll go kind of through the real motions. But with some of the injuries I've sustained over the last 5 to 10 years, it's not the best idea for me to really be playing competitively on a consistent basis.
And Pete, that's what I like about golf, is that like this is why everyone ends up playing it. It's because you're not. I mean, I do have like bad sore hips after I end up playing, but I'm not drastically injuring myself potentially every time I step out onto the tee box.
Yeah, exactly. I was listening to someone. I think it was Lance Armstrong the other day, and he was talking about how running culture has become so popular, but it's actually really a rough sport on your body, racking that up on your knees and stuff. And he was like, if I could have one sport, and of course this is a cyclist, he's like, it would be swimming, because there's a longevity to it where you don't take any additional wear and tear. He's like, if I could only do one thing, it'd be swimming. It's like the same with golf. It's like, I kind of wish that if I was just good at one sport, all that time I spent playing basketball and I never play basketball now, it'd be really nice if I was good at golf, because it's such a thing that everyone does. It's social. You do it with the boys. You can do it with business stuff. You can do it with the family. I'm like, I wish I was really good at golf instead of decent at basketball right now.
It's funny you mentioned running, because I've been running now probably like 5 days a week for the past 10, 15 years. It's really started to take, like, I've had to stop almost actively. Like, I can do it once a week now or twice a week. Other than that, I need to incline walk, because like I've blown up my calf 3 times now on both sides. Yeah. Like, my knees aren't all that bad, but like hamstring problems, hip problems, I've just taken so much damage. And that's even after correcting for, I actually stretch before I have to do things now. And I cool down afterwards to make sure that everything doesn't get tight. I hydrate and make sure that I don't go too intense all the time, but just my body can't handle it anymore.
It's so taxing on your body. I mean, I don't really understand. And I know that like marathon runners and half marathon runners, they do it like up until they're like, well and old, into their 60s and whatnot. It like Pete was suggesting, it's so taxing on your body. I mean, I think a lot of people that want to get in shape, they think they have to run to get in shape. I mean, just getting your heart rate up and just getting your cardio going one way or the other, whether it's bicycling or swimming or maybe kind of soft incline stuff. I think that's kind of like the more way to go. What's interesting though about the golf thing, what we've all noticed over the last like 5 years, those who were playing like basketball and whatever, just like the common sports that you play in your teenage and young adult years. I feel like pickleball is sort of taking over, and then they're going to golf, right? Like I'm not saying you don't have to be athletic for pickleball, but it definitely seems like the sport that's like in between, like those like kind of, okay, I can play when I'm older sports, and the young man and woman sports that like conventionally we talk about.
Problem with pickleball, Pete, is all these old dudes are playing it and they're blowing out their Achilles. Like, it is a bit too taxing for them, and it's marketed to old people. Like, even someone like Bernhard Langer, who plays golf on the senior tour, he had to miss the entire season, blew out his Achilles playing pickleball.
Well, that's why I was dying laughing, because it was right after COVID. My wife and I did like our first kind of trip vacation. We went down to Hilton Head, which is essentially like a retirement community. And all the old people were playing pickleball. There was some like big pickleball tournament there. That's what I've always associated pickleball with. But then since then, pickleball has blown up as like this semi-ironic thing that young people love to do. And I think the reason it catches on, right, is because it's not actually that hard to be good at it, right? It's basically just like playing like bigger ping pong. And so it's more social. It's like, oh, me and my girlfriend, we can go do a double date, or me and the boys can go do it. You think about golf, right? And, Mayo, like the first few times you golfed, imagine like the pressure of if you didn't know how to golf and you're just like, God damn it, I'm in the woods, I'm shanking stuff, I'm losing balls. It's not like a good, like social, easy thing to ramp into, where it's like pickleball is like going bowling with bumpers. It's just like the stakes are so low, and so people eat it up. I hate it though. I think it's awful.
People take it so seriously in South Florida. I got to tell you, just living there for 17 years, it is big time down there. It's crazy.
Curling kind of has that feel to it as well. Like, curling is essentially, curling's hard, but you can be actively not bad at it very quickly. Whereas with golf, you're just, I'm good and I'm bad. So that ends up becoming like sort of the struggle that you have. It's that competitive nature that you're facing yourself with it. But curling is fun because it's like bowling on ice, Pete.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's actually cool. I mean, and I think us, Americans, we fetishize, like, do you guys just have places you can go? Like, are curling centers
Rinks.
as ubiquitous as pickleball courts are down here?
No, because, I mean, they cost so much money to maintain. Just there's a lot of hockey rinks around. There's probably more hockey rinks than anything else that you could find. I think like where I'm at, I think there's like 2 curling clubs. It's kind of like a golf club in a weird way, because not that many people do it, but the people who do it really love it, and it becomes like a social club there. Like, I have to drive 30 minutes to get to like my golf club, so I'm not sticking around after the fact, like hammering a few beers and then driving home. It's like, well, I don't want to hammer the few beers because I have to drive home, so I just go home. So I don't really hang out at the clubhouse all that much. But it seems like with the curling clubs, they're more in the city because they're not as big as golf courses. So it becomes like a social activity for a lot of people too.
Well, I do think that's something to love about sports as well. Like I sometimes always lament, when you think about, meeting up with a friend, catching up with someone, doing a date, whatever, it's almost always like, do you want to go meet up for a drink? It's like, it's nice to have alternatives to that. Like, don't get me wrong. I like getting a drink, a cocktail as much as anyone, but having this idea of like, hey, let's go play golf. Let's go play tennis. Let's go do an activity together. The fact that sports can facilitate a non-alcohol activity where two people can enjoy being together is a wonderful thing.
It's funny too, Sia, because I've seen like a lot of my friend group break off into smaller groups based on the activities that they have as adults now. Like I don't play in the pickup basketball league, but a lot of my friends do. And obviously like that collection of like 6 dudes have become a lot closer. Whereas like, the other half of the group, we all golf, but we all golf together all the time. And that's when we see each other. It's funny how those dynamics change the older you get.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good example of maybe one of like several reasons why typically a friend group or anyone's friend group from high school to college through young adult through adult life starts to diminish little by little because you start to lose some time because of family and other obligations, work and otherwise, but also because, like other friends end up having other interests. So, I mean, I think all of that makes sense.
And it's no different, Pete, than your friends who have kids versus your friends who don't have kids, that is a clear separation within friend groups. Like we're seeing it so prevalent right now. Like if let's say the 16 closest friends that I have, because I moved back to where I was, a lot of high school friends, a lot of college friends, because I went to college here as well. Like the people with kids tend to hang out with each other a lot more, not even just with play dates, but like, hey, we're going to go out and get drinks tonight and go to a restaurant. Like everyone's arranging their sitters. Whereas I got a text last night from a buddy. It's like, hey, we're all watching the hockey game if you want to come down. It's like, I have to watch my kids. I can't go anywhere.
Yeah. I know. It's just how it happens. I mean, we naturally gravitate to people not only with shared interests, but at similar points in our lives, right? It's like if you are even just married and then you have a single friend, like how often do they want to tag along and be third wheel on your date? It's like, no, man, you're out chasing at the bars and going to clubs, and we just want to go out to dinner, watch a show on Netflix, and be in bed by 9:30. So it's like you got to find someone who's at a similar point in your life to enjoy those things.
Sia, what do you got next on your list?
So I'm going to go with, this is a more generic than anything because I don't have a specific example other than what you see on social media. It's walk-ons getting scholarships. I love watching the videos of walk-ons getting scholarships, and they're like kind of, speaking of that, you guys use the word ubiquitous. I mean, they truly are everywhere now. But it's not just the video. I mean, if you really think about it, like what it represents, like this is usually a kid, man or woman, but typically the videos we see just happen to be men. It's typically a situation where the kid got ignored. He was probably kind of a star in high school, got ignored, never got recruited, probably went from feeling like a huge winner to feeling like he was, mediocre. And then all of a sudden he's a walk-on. He's putting in all the hard work. It's finally getting recognized and he's getting the validation he deserves. And to see it all culminate in some of those really clever moments where the coach pretends he's getting a phone call and it's like the person's mom or whatever it is, it's always kind of set up in a fun way when you actually see the videos. But I love watching that stuff. I could watch it all day.
The teary-eyed Instagram feed? Just walk on the Instagram feed.
That's the one.
That you can just run that and become a billionaire.
Yeah, that's a good call.
What about you?
My next move.
What's your next move on this list?
So yeah, because I kind of already talked about my number 4, which was the having, sports betting and fantasy sports as an excuse to keep up with your buddies and mentioning that. So that was my 4. So my last one is I love that sports represents the last bit of monoculture. And that's to say everything else now is so hyper niche, hyper segmented. We all can have X feeds, YouTube feeds, Netflix likes and wants, like all perfectly curated to our specific interests. We can watch it on demand. You might watch the show, 4 days later, you might watch it 5 months later. And it's like, no spoilers. Everything's like, we're all interacting with media on these very different wavelengths, but sports is the one thing that we have all universally agreed you have to watch it live. None of us are going to say no spoilers about the Super Bowl because I haven't had a chance to watch it on DVR delay. And even, obviously the Super Bowl right in the rearview mirror, so it's front of mind. And it's also like the biggest sporting event in the world. So maybe it's not the perfect way to illustrate this point, but it's like everyone comes together, everyone's talking about it in real time. it is the focus of the universe at that given point. And I think that's really cool because it doesn't happen with TV shows, even SNL, something like that, that used to be part of the monoculture. That doesn't happen anymore. It's now all digitized. It's all spread out and segmented down into niches. So I love that sports is this one unifying element for all of us to, consume live at the same time.
Sia, to expand on that a little bit more, I had a discussion, I believe, on an upcoming Cuss Corner, which will probably come out in 2 weeks' time, about how it's even more increasingly difficult to go viral at this point in the true sense, like the monocultural sense, like we remember when YouTube first started or when stuff was on E-Bomb's world. Because you can go viral on TikTok, but if I'm not using TikTok, which I don't, I will legitimately never see what you're talking about.
That's an interesting example because I think I've logged on to TikTok like twice in my life, and there's a lot of stuff that people reference. I'm on Instagram and what people used to call Twitter, but there's a lot of people that reference things that I'm like unfamiliar with. If it's not on YouTube, if it's not on Twitter or Instagram, like I'm probably not going to see it either. That's interesting because my thought, Pat, was that if you were, and I don't know this, but that if you did something that was super viral on TikTok, my just assumption would be that person would have an account on Instagram, or that would get pulled over to Instagram by some onlooker and it would become viral on Instagram as well. But because I'm not on both platforms, I don't know.
And, well, Pete, the last thing I can really remember about this would be like Hawk to a Girl. That just ended up being everywhere. It didn't matter where it originated. It permutated through every social media app. But I don't really remember all that much beyond that in the recent past.
Yeah, and even then, though, that's like a piece of media that, everyone's consuming on their own time, or like you said, on their own app of choice, wherever you're consuming things. There is no like universal water cooler at this point. It, still feels like X, at least to me, is that one place. But Sia mentioned like WhatsApp chats, obviously Discord communities, Telegram communities, like all of this stuff. Like people are even drilling down their social networks into smaller things because they're like, my Facebook feed is a disaster. My For You page is a disaster. I actually want to carve out a space for finding more like-minded individuals and keeping out some of the riffraff, the trolls, the bots, etc. Because none of us want to have to deal with the actual, dark side of the monoculture, which are all those things I just mentioned.
So last thing for me, number one on my list, and I know that both of you guys got kids, and it's finally starting to hit me now. My kids are 6 and 5, and just the absolute joy that I get watching them enjoy learning all these sports. Like, they're going to get to the point where they're 10 or 11 and they play on travel teams or rep teams or whatever it might be, and they start taking this seriously. But right now, it's just about like running around and being as happy as possible, trying to learn things. See, my son told me last night, we were reading a baseball book, and it was about the umpire calls strike 3. And he just said that umpires are really mean for telling people that they're out. And that they should be a little bit nicer, and they should say, that's a good try, but you have to go back to the bench now.
That is amazing. The shocking thing about that, Pat, no offense, is that's your son.
Yes.
Like playing the super nice card. I'm stunned.
He's too young to know any better.
What's interesting? I have 2 sons as well. I'm kind of on the other side of the spectrum, Pat, and I don't think they're going to watch this show. Too young for it. They're not super athletic, and they're not super into, actually one of them is athletic. He's kind of on the smaller side, but they're not super into sports, and which is interesting because I'm obviously super into sports and grew up playing sports as well. So it's such an interesting, be careful, big word here, juxtaposition. I hate doing that. I could have used it. Contrast is a word I could have used there. Because I don't have that experience as much as you do. So I do kind of long for it. And maybe they'll graduate into that where they're like, I think they're starting to get some interest because some of their friends at school are like casually interested as well. But I can't share that experience with you because I don't have it yet.
And Pete, it seems like you're just ramping up to that right now.
Yeah, it's my daughter's a little over 2 years old. So, she'll kick the soccer ball around. She'll take some swings, at the T-ball stuff. But yeah, I'm getting very excited for that stage. Yesterday over the weekend, I was teaching her how to catch. I'm like, just keep your hands out here. I'm tossing her stuffed animals and there. So I'm very much ready to, sports pill my daughter here.
Yeah, it's funny like how like even to play catch with a 2-year-old or something like that you see them and they can't catch. They have no concept of how to catch. You tell them how to do it, and they want to catch everything like this somehow. Like catch it with your hands. That'll be much easier to do. It's like no, I need to like embrace it into my body. It's like those bad wide receivers that don't actively go to the high point of the ball. They try to let the Favre guys for years. That's why Favre had all of his guys. Because you bring in these new dudes, you just pelt them in the chest and would just bounce off and end up being a pick. Like no, you need to grab that shit with your hands, man.
I was gonna say the fact that the same thing where I'm teaching my 2-year-old still needs to be taught to some NFL wide receivers is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Well, what else do you guys have before we close this out?
I've got a couple that I can just rattle off. I will tell you the Linsanity thing was my number one. Sports personalities in interviews and particularly being mic'd up is amazing. I think you find it more in the NFL than anything else. But anytime I can get a soundbite, not on set, but like a real soundbite from like a Gronkowski or a Kittle or better yet a Jameis Winston, it's just so good. And I do think it personalizes some of these players a little bit more. It kind of gives you an idea of like who they are, but like that they're actually real people. Jameis in particular, though, I mean, he says some funny stuff when he's being interviewed, but like even on the field, you remember, I think it was the Steelers game. I can't remember. It was this year where he was playing for the Browns and he was trying to draw somebody off sides and he's like 180 hut. And he's doing all the things. And then he literally said afterward, and still trying to draw somebody off sides, somebody jump off sides. Damn. Like those moments are just so incredibly hilarious. And I just love when players are mic'd up because again, it gives you another element of the sport.
I think that's something we don't see enough, Pete, is the fun that these guys still have playing, even when I think that's kind of the Deshaun Watson thing right now. Like, yeah, he's no good. Yeah, he gets paid all this money. Yeah, he might be kind of a creep. But there also seems to be no joy when he plays. And that's really saving Jameis at the moment. Like, Jameis is not good at all. But it seems like he's having fun and people like that.
Yeah, no. And it trickles down to the locker room, right? Like there's legitimate, there's all the stuff we do with analytics and trying to, analyze teams. And then, sometimes we reject this notion of locker room guys or chemistry. It's like that stuff is real. Like the Cleveland Browns absolutely love Jameis. I promise you those guys are getting up to play for him. Same for the coaches, right? I remember a couple years ago, like the Raiders hated playing for Josh McDaniels. Like they were miserable. And then you see Antonio Pierce come in and they're like rah, everybody's buddy because they finally had someone they were excited to play for. I mean, that stuff is very real.
Sia, did you want to list off the few others at the bottom of your list?
I'll give you two more. One is when this happens in baseball a lot, when like an adult catches a baseball home run or a foul ball and like hands it to a kid, or better yet, like a kid catches a foul ball and hands it to another kid. I think most people have seen like the young kid who caught one and gave it to a young girl that was like of similar age and he's got this wry smile on his face. I think those are really fun moments and they happen all the time. And then contest winners, like half court contest winners where fans like come down and shoot a half court shot or a golf shot the length of a college basketball court, or of course like field goal kicks is what we've seen a lot in the college football format. Those are really fun. I think a lot of people might remember down in Miami when I was living there, some random guys pulled down and he shoots a half court shot, but he doesn't have the strength to make it with both hands. So he shoots like a Woody Harrelson hook shot from White Men Can't Jump. And it is just like the perfect shot, lands right in the middle of the basket and he gets tackled by LeBron James. It was such a cool, wild moment. And those things are really, really fun.
Pete, did you have any final ones?
No, man, I feel like this has been fun though. It's like been jogging all of these, latent memories inside me because there is an element to fantasy sports, right? Where you get jaded. You play sport after sport. You get used to losing. It is just a lot of numbers on a sheet, Obviously you have the sweats, but even like the sweats can make you feel gross. Like I on Sundays, I have this come down after the games finish where most of the weeks you lose and you just kind of like you're a little depressed or you're whatever. And you're like, at the end of the day, it is nice to zoom out, be like, no, sports are supposed to be fun. Fantasy sports is supposed to be additive to that experience. And it is easy to lose sight of that sometimes. You see really dumb discourse. You see the talking heads shouting at each other about it, and you're like, wait. Like, this is supposed to be fun. And so I enjoyed doing this show and reminding me, guys, that sports are great.
And I want to hear from you people watching right now. You smash like, you sub to the channel. Pete had mentioned Substack earlier. I have a Substack that's free to join down in the description. I send out my newsletters twice, maybe sometimes 3 times a week if things are going a little bit more positively and there's more sports going on. But Sia, you were the inspiration for this show. I want to put some love out on Valentine's Day into the ether, and you do your positivity streams, which I very much enjoy.
Thank you for saying that. It's funny that we're doing this today. I actually have one of those Twitter Spaces tonight with a special guest, somebody Joe Idoni is going to kick that off with me. But I do a lot. I've got like a positivity Discord, which I know isn't for everybody, so I'm not trying to pretend that it is. But with all of that said, if anybody's kind of looking for more of that side of things, I do a lot of that stuff. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll find it.
Pete, do you know where you will not find those people? In the YouTube comment section of my live chats.
Yeah. Where can we maybe do like an audience switch, Sia? Can you bring some of those positive people over into our chats?
Well, the truth is there's not many of them. People aren't necessarily looking for that content on social media, but we do have some very consistent participants, and that's all I can ask for.
Pete, I'll be joining you over on the Pete Overzet YouTube channel tomorrow night. And what else do you want to pump up?
How about this? Yeah, definitely come and watch the show. It is a premium show on my YouTube channel, so you can become a YouTube member, and then you can get access to that and lots of kind of archived evergreen conversations with other people in the DFS and fantasy space. Get lots of good feedback on that. You know what I'll do? You mentioned the Substack. You mentioned your Substack. I subscribe to that. Let's mention 2 newsletters. So I write the Fantasy Life newsletter over there with Matthew Berry and the crew over there. It's not going to be 7 days a week now that the season's over, but it's 5 days a week. Hit your inbox completely free. And then I have a personal newsletter called the P.O. Box newsletter, also free. Just drop it in your inbox every Saturday. Talk about my favorite shows, different things I'm thinking about, health, exercise, kind of, tangential to kind of all the fantasy sports stuff. So yeah, that's the P.O. Box newsletter as well. I'd love if you subscribe to both of those free newsletters.
Is the P.O. Box on Substack?
No, they're both on Beehive is the platform that hosts them.
Yeah, I've noticed that because, this show airs on TV, too. I don't know if you guys know that. I don't know how many people watch it on there, but beyond YouTube and the podcast feed, I always forget, some people are watching where the links are not available in the description. So telling people, Mayo Media Substack and the P.O. Box on Beehive is where you can get Pete's newsletter. Sia at Nejad on X, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, is where he does his positivity spaces, and you can check him out there to find that Discord as well. I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely weekend full of positivity, and I will see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!